For Max Weber, politics is not simply a profession or a set of institutions, but a vocation, a calling that asks for both inner conviction and worldly responsibility. To begin, Weber offers his famous definition of the modern state. A state is any human community that successfully claims the monopoly of the legitimate use of physical force within a given territory. This is not merely about power. Bandits and warlords also have force, but about legitimate power, force recognized as rightful by its citizens. Legitimacy for Weber matters as much as capacity. When Weber spoke these words in 1919, Germany was in turmoil. The First World War had ended in defeat, the Kaiser had abdicated, revolutions and counter-revolutions swept the streets. Weber's lecture, Politics as a Vocation, was not delivered in a moment of calm reflection, but against the backdrop of barricades, marches, and a society on edge. To him, the urgency of defining politics was inseparable from this atmosphere of crisis. Weber makes a crucial distinction. Either one lives for politics or one lives from politics. To live from politics is to treat it as a career, a way of making one's livelihood, exploiting office for income, status, or advantage. To live for politics, however, is to see it as a cause, a calling, something pursued out of devotion, not gain. For Weber, only those who can make this distinction clearly are able to grasp what it truly means to have politics as a vocation. In one of his most enduring images, Weber insists that politics is not for the impatient. It is, he says, a strong and slow boring of hard boards. It requires both passion and perspective, the ability to act with conviction while enduring the slow grind of reality. Politics is not the work of a moment, it is the work of a lifetime. The vocation demands both fire and patience, both the heart of belief and the discipline of realism. Weber does not stop at defining the state as the holder of legitimate force. He also asks, why do people obey? Why do they recognize power as rightful? As he puts it, every domination seeks to awaken and maintain the belief in its legitimacy. For Weber, legitimacy comes in three fundamental types. First, there is traditional authority, obedience grounded in custom and inheritance. Kings rule because they always have, because their authority is woven into the fabric of tradition. Weber describes this as resting on an established belief in the sanctity of immemorial traditions. This kind of legitimacy is ancient, almost unquestioned, but it binds politics to the weight of the past. Second, there is charismatic authority, power rooted in the magnetic personality of a leader. Here, people obey not because of tradition or law, but because the leader inspires devotion. Weber calls it resting on devotion to the exceptional sanctity, heroism, or exemplary character of an individual person. Think of prophets, generals, or revolutionary leaders, those whose extraordinary qualities seem to suspend ordinary rules. Yet charisma is unstable. It burns bright, but it also burns out. Finally, there is legal rational authority, the hallmark of modern bureaucratic states. In this form, power is grounded in rules, offices, and procedures. Weber notes that it rests on a belief in the legality of enacted rules and the right of those elevated to authority under such rules to issue commands. People obey not a person, but the impersonal authority of the law. Civil services, courts, and parliaments embody this type. Weber's typology shows us that politics is never just about coercion. It is about the forms of belief that make coercion acceptable. Each type of legitimacy produces its own dangers. Tradition can stifle change, charisma can slide into demagoguery, and legal rational bureaucracy can become a cold machine, crushing individuality under layers of regulation. Still, Weber saw the spread of legal rational authority as the defining feature of modern politics. Bureaucracy, he argued, is efficient, predictable, and precise, but it also traps us in what he called the iron cage of rationalization. Modern political life is thus a paradox. It offers order and stability, but at the cost of disenchantment, turning human action into paperwork, procedure, and rule following. By outlining these types of legitimacy, Weber helps us see politics not as a single phenomenon, but as a shifting balance between tradition, charisma, and legality, between the personal and the impersonal, the past and the future, the spirit and the machine. Weber draws a sharp distinction between those who live for politics and those who live from politics. He writes, either one lives for politics or lives from politics. Living for politics means dedicating oneself to public service, to the ideals and responsibilities of leadership. It is a vocation rooted in commitment, sacrifice, and a sense of duty to the community. These individuals accept the burdens of office, the moral ambiguities, and even the potential personal cost because their purpose is service, not self-interest. Conversely, living from politics describes those who see political activity as a career, a source of income, or a means to personal advancement. Careers in patronage networks, party machines, or media manipulation exemplify this path. Here, politics becomes a profession, subject to calculation, ambition, and the incentives of office, rather than moral imperatives. Weber cautions that this approach risks prioritizing personal gain over public good, yet it is inseparable from modern political life. The tension between for and from politics is not merely theoretical, it shapes the character of political institutions. Leaders who aspire to ideals must navigate bureaucracies, electoral pressures, and public opinion. Journalists and party operatives navigating these same systems face constant choices to report, influence, or maneuver for career benefit. Weber reminds us that understanding this duality is crucial for evaluating leadership. The same office can host a statesman guided by conscience or a functionary guided by ambition. By making this distinction explicit, Weber illuminates the moral and practical stakes of political life. Recognizing whether one acts for or from politics helps us assess motives, predict behavior, and understand the ethical pressures that define modern governance. In his words, the choice is stark. Either one lives for politics or lives from politics. What qualities, Weber asks, distinguish a true politician? He identifies three essential virtues: passion, responsibility, and proportion. Passion for Weber is not mere emotion or vanity, but devotion to a cause that gives meaning to action. Responsibility means carrying the weight of consequences, acting not only with conviction, but with awareness of effects on real lives. And proportion, or Sachlichkeit, is the discipline of judgment, the ability to remain calm, to keep one's ego in check, and to see things as they are. In Weber's sharp phrase, politics is made with the head, not with the other parts of the body or soul. From these virtues flow two great ethical orientations. The ethic of conviction, or Gesinnungsethik, urges the politician to act in accordance with principles regardless of consequences. The ethic of responsibility, or Verantwortungsethik, demands that one consider foreseeable results, even when this means compromise. Neither is sufficient alone. As Weber warns, he who seeks the salvation of his soul should not seek it along the avenue of politics. Here lies the problem of what later thinkers call dirty hands. Political action, bound up with power and coercion, cannot avoid compromise or morally tainted choices. A leader may face a tragic decision, such as endorsing an unjust policy to prevent civil war. This is the tension: principles versus outcomes, purity versus responsibility. For Weber, the mature politician accepts this burden. Politics is a strong and slow boring of hard boards. It takes both passion and perspective. The vocation of politics, then, is not about purity, but balance. Great leaders are those who combine conviction with responsibility, ideals with realism. As Weber puts it, politics is the art of compromise and of strong, slow drilling through hard boards. Weber ends his lecture with one of his most enduring images: politics as the strong and slow boring of hard boards. By this, he means that political life is not a realm of instant victories or dramatic purity. It is a craft that requires patience, endurance, and a willingness to face resistance without losing heart. This image cuts against both cynicism and fanaticism. The cynic, who believes politics is nothing but corruption and futility, withdraws or sneers instead of engaging. The fanatic, who demands immediate success or absolute purity, breaks against the hardness of reality or turns destructive in frustration. Weber insists that genuine political vocation lies in a steadier path, the acceptance of difficulty, the refusal of shortcuts, and the perseverance to chip away at structures that resist change. As he warns, only he has the calling for politics who is sure that he shall not collapse when the world, from his point of view, is too stupid or too base for what he wants to offer it. The politician must be ready to endure disappointment, slow progress, and even moral compromise, without giving up the cause that sustains him. This vision remains strikingly relevant today. In an age of short attention spans, populist promises, and polarized demands, Weber's reminder is sobering. Politics is not the work of the impatient or the pure of heart alone. It belongs to those who combine passion with proportion, conviction with responsibility, and the perseverance to keep going even when results are uncertain. For Weber, the true political leader is not a dreamer nor a cynic, but someone who understands that power, ideals, and reality must meet in long, difficult labor. The hard boards will not bore themselves. It is the vocation of politics to keep drilling, slowly but with determination.